All right, clarinet players, it's time to put the instrument together. Now, we've already talked about reed guards and how important it is to use a reed guard and start on reed number 1, 2, then 3, and 4. If we haven't talked about it yet, we'll talk about it soon. The first thing you're going to do is get your next reed out. I'm starting with number 1 today. And you're going to get it wet with saliva, not spit, saliva. Your tongue is covered in saliva. It's not covered in spit. Spit is stuff you go and get from the back of your nose, but saliva is from your mouth, and we want this covered in saliva. So you put it in your mouth like this, and you shouldn't be talking when you have a reed in your mouth, but I need to give you instructions. So instead of having my reed in my mouth while I put my instrument together for you, I want you to have the reed in your mouth because you shouldn't be talking. You'll just be listening and following along. So it goes, you just put the reed right on your tongue and leave it there. And you don't want to mess up that fine edge on the very tip. Hopefully this is a reminder for everyone. When you're done using your reed, you'll wipe off this extra saliva and you'll slide it back into its slot that it came out of. And the next time you play from the next reed. These are like using a pre-sharpened pencil that you're not allowed to sharpen. So you want to make sure your reeds last a long time. That's why we use a reed cover or a reed case or reed guard. These are all the same words that can describe this piece of plastic. If you keep your reeds in the plastic that it came in, maybe it looks like this or like this, then these are like bubble wrap. They're not good protectors, okay? So you want to make sure your reeds are protected. Okay, assembling the instrument goes like this. Oh, here's another example of the bubble wrap that they come in, okay? We don't want the bubble wrap. You take the bubble wrap, you recycle it, you put this into your reed guard. All right, this one's brand new, so I'll give it to a student when it's ready. Make sure your case is right side up. The logo and the words are facing up. To double check, do a little wiggle wiggle, make sure this is the lid. If it doesn't wiggle, it's probably the bottom, so you want to make sure it's right side up. When we put our instrument together, we want to make sure that all of the corks have a little bit of cork grease on it. If you just got your instrument, it most likely does not need cork grease. It most likely has enough moisture on the corks already. If we lived in Texas and it was super dry and we live in a desert, maybe Arizona or New Mexico, and things dry out faster, we would use more cork grease. But we're lucky enough, it's humid, we don't need to add cork grease all that often. Maybe about once every month, maybe every other month, not that often. You might need to rub off extra cork grease, then wash your hands. You don't want to get cork grease in the keys of your clarinet. When we attach pieces, like the bell section to the lower joint, we want to make sure that we're not going to smash any of these delicate key braces. These are all really important that we don't break any of these pieces. So when we grab the clarinet, grab it from as much black as you can, grabbing as much black section as you can. All right, so while firmly holding the black of the clarinet, you know, put the two pieces together, do a slight wiggle and a light push. If it takes a lot of effort, stop and go back and maybe ask Mr. Coons for some help. You should not have to push that hard. If you push too hard or you squeeze too hard like this, if I squeeze too hard with this hand, I'm going to bend all of these struts and these braces, so it's important we grab just the black section of the clarinet. If you look on the back, there's a lot of space for you to grab. My hands are pretty big. Your little hands might do a better job at grabbing it. Okay, there's the bell and the lower joint. Now, I'm not going to set my clarinet down, the only time I set it down is back in the case. The trickiest part of assembling the clarinet is adding the lower joint to the upper joint. The lower joint has a piece right here. This is called the bridge key, and it bridges between the lower joint to the upper joint. I'm going to set my lower joint down here in the case so it's nice and safe, and show you that on the top upper joint, here's the bridge key. You'll notice it overlaps with the cork. So this key, if you put your clarinet together wrong, it can bend and break. And it happens all the time, and we're going to make sure it doesn't happen this year, okay? So watch out for your bridge key. This bridge key moves up and down when you press 1, 2, 3. When you press on the tone hole number 2, it moves the bridge key. See it wiggling down there? If I show it this way, let's see, I want to make sure. There we go. See it wiggle in there? We want to make sure it's in the up position when we put it together. Let me show you a close-up. So here's our upper joint, here's our lower joint. Our lower joint has its bridge key there, right here, and our upper joint has it right here, right? So we want this to be up, and this one is going to stay down. If we press on any of these keys here, it's going to move it up. And we want it to stay down. So we don't want to press any keys. We're going to grab that same spot on the lower joint we did earlier, grabbing the black of the clarinet, not the silver, holding it nice and firm. There's my bridge key right there, nice and flat. It's not lifted up. If you see a gap underneath the bridge key, then you've lifted it up. We don't want to see that gap. So keep it nice and flat. Now, the upper joint, before you connect it, you want to make sure you're pressing down on the second tone hole to wiggle that key. If you can't find it, just keep pressing the keys until you find the one that wiggles it. When it's wiggled up, and then you can connect it, push lightly, twist a little bit, and we'll go together, no problem. So you see how my bridge key is lifted up and then it's touching. It's lifted, and now it's touching. And you can see some bridge keys even have some lines on it to help line it up. So I can twist it a little bit to, there we go, nice and lined up. Now the clarinet is connected, so when I press a key on the bottom, it'll move keys on the top. I don't know if you can see, but if I'm pressing this one, the top ones are wiggling. All right? So that's the hardest part of setting up the clarinet. Next comes the barrel. The barrel looks like this. It's bigger on the bottom than it is on the top, so if you try to put it on upside down, it won't fit. Just put it on the right way. Easy little push and twist. All right, and last but not least is our mouthpiece. Now the mouthpiece has 4 different parts. This part's really important. This is called the cover. That makes sense. It covers the mouthpiece. Here's the mouthpiece itself. It has a big hole here where the reed is going to go. And if the reed is laying flat on here and is covering the hole, you'll make a beautiful sound on the clarinet. But if it chips, if this falls over, and it breaks, your mouthpiece won't work. And so it's important to put a cover on it when you're not playing. That way, if there's ever an accident, it doesn't break the mouthpiece. It might break the cover. And that's what covers are for. So we have the cover. We have what's called the ligature, this metal piece with the screws, the mouthpiece, and of course, your reed, which should be in your mouth while you're setting up the rest of the instrument. While you've been setting up the rest of this, your reed is sitting on your tongue. Yes. Make sure it's in your mouth. It's very important that this gets nice and soft with saliva. I bumped into the clarinet here. So sorry, clarinet. Did I bump you out of place? There we go. Okay. We will worry about adding the reed once the entire instrument's put together. The reed will go on last. With the hole facing you and the keys facing away, so that the back of the clarinet is facing you, you should see the thumb catch on the bottom right and the thumb hole for the top left. With that facing you and the hole facing you, put the two together. I'm going to move this out of the way. I like to rest it on my lap or even on the chair. My lap is preferred so that I can push on something soft like my leg. The hole or the flat side is facing me. Do a little push and twist, and it's all put together. Now if I blow into this, no sound's going to come out. So then I will take the reed out of my mouth and I'll take it out of my mouth. It's been in my mouth the whole time. Then I place it on the flat side and line it up like we talked about in class. And we practice this a lot in class before you do it on your own. Then the ligature goes over this, and the screws will face to your right. So when I'm playing, the screws will face to my right side, okay? Even if you're left-handed, the screws will face to the right. We want to screw it onto the mouthpiece so it's snug but not too tight. And we want the reed to be far enough up on the mouthpiece so that you can just barely see a little bit of black from the mouthpiece sticking out. You see how there's just a little bit of black before the reed touches the edge? That's perfect. If we flip it over, we shouldn't be able to see the reed, okay? And now you're all set up and ready to play. Woohoo! this reed is very stiff because it wasn't sitting in my mouth. But now you're ready to play. When you're all done, you loosen the ligature. You can set it back down next to the case, or the cover. Your reed will go back into its reed case. You might need to wipe off some of the extra saliva. That's normal. That's okay. Put it back where it came from. Then we just go backwards. Mouthpiece comes off. We add the ligature back to the mouthpiece and put the cover on all three of them. Back into the case. It's easy to get mixed up on where to put the pieces of the instrument in the case. Just like putting it together, you shouldn't put too much force. If it doesn't fit, try turning it around, try another spot in the case. They all have their right spot. This is a pretty easy puzzle to get used to, but the first time it might be kind of confusing. When you take the clarinet apart, we don't need to worry so much about the bridge key when we take it apart, but we do want to be aware that we're not pushing down on any keys, so we're going to grab the black sections of the instrument, do the twist and pull. And we're going to rest this here. I think it goes there. Ooh, it laid in nice and flat. That's perfect. And we're going to take the bell section off, still holding the black section of the clarinet, so I'm not pressing on any keys. The bell goes in there. If you try to put a piece in backwards and then you try to close it, it's not going to close. And if you force it to close, you're going to break something. So don't ever force it. Just try turning it around. Ah, there we go. That fits much better. I just had to turn around. Nothing goes in your instrument case except your instrument and a few accessories. The only accessories you should have in your clarinet case is cork grease, extra reeds, which shouldn't be in their bubble wrap, should be in a reed case. And lastly is a swab. I don't know why this one's missing a swab. Let me get a swab for it. Okay, I couldn't find a swab, but here's an example of a swab. This is a bass clarinet swab, so it's a little bit bigger, but a swab cleans out the inside of your clarinet. We'll talk about that in class, and it goes in here, okay? The main thing is putting it together can be very tricky, so make sure you learn how to put it together safely and carefully. Watch out for those bridge keys. Make sure it's all laying nice and flat. Then it's ready to close. Click. Make sure it's fully closed before you lift it up. Always do a little squeeze. Double check those latches. Maybe you've got flip latches like a trumpet case. Double check those latches and you're all set. All right, everybody. Check Canvas for fingering charts. Check Smart Music to play some activities on the clarinet and you'll be all right. Continue practicing. If anything ever breaks or falls off of your clarinet, put it into a plastic bag and stop everything you're doing, put it all back into the case as best you can, and keep all the little pieces. Look on the floor, look through the carpet, get a magnet out if you need to find all the little screws that might have fallen off. Bring all those pieces back. I am very good at putting instruments back together, but making parts is not easy. So make sure you collect the parts if it falls apart. All right, clarinets are tricky. If you have any questions, you can always give me an email and send me an email with any questions you have. You can also ask our principal any clarinet questions because she used to be a clarinet player and I think she still plays it. You'll have to find out for me. I'm not sure. Maybe you can ask her when you see her next. All right. Have fun putting it together, everybody. Let me know if you have any questions.